We are making a gluten-free version of the viral Dubai chocolate bar. You've probably already seen it and thought, hey, I can't eat this. It's full of gluten. Where do I find gluten-free phyllo dough? So we're going to make our own. And we're going to have a couple other options too in case you don't want to make your own. But this was actually pretty easy and kind of fun. So we're going to start by making our pistachio butter from scratch. You don't have to do this. You can go out and buy pistachio cream or pistachio butter, but we had pistachios, so we're going to put them on a tray and we're going to put them in the oven for a little bit. The oven toasts them, it gives it a nice flavor, and it also helps release the oils, which helps make the butter. And we're going to get some white chocolate and we're going to melt it. This is going to be a fun swirly decoration in our molds. You can skip this step if you want. Sidebar, people keep asking what happened to our white chocolate or why is it so dark. This is the white chocolate, vegan white chocolate that we make at our bakery and sell at our store. We make it with cocoa butter, coconut milk powder, and coconut sugar. And it's the coconut sugar that makes it so dark, but it's delicious. So we're going to drizzle some in our molds. We'll link to our mold down below if you don't have a thick mold. We also have thinner molds for just plain chocolate, but this mold is really great for filled chocolate bars. And our pistachios are done toasting, so we're going to pull them out of the oven. We're going to let them cool a little. And just for fun, we're going to try adding some spirulina powder to our white chocolate and see if we can add some more decoration to our molds. Now, because we're not starting with white chocolate, we aren't going to get a pretty bright blue, but let's see what happens. So we've got sort of an army green color, and I have blue spirulina all over my hands, but let's go ahead and drizzle that in our molds too. Make a fun pattern. And then we're going to pop these in the fridge just till they set up, and then we're going to do the dark chocolate. Okay, off to the fridge. Now for the dark chocolate, we're going to grab a bowl and we're going to melt some dark chocolate. Now it's easier if you have an excess of dark chocolate, although chocolate can be expensive, so if you want to not buy so much chocolate, you can go with a different method of filling your molds. So the easiest way is to fill your molds full of chocolate, let them sit for a bit, and the outsides will set, and then you can dump the extra chocolate back into your bowl. But like I said, you need a lot of extra chocolate for that. What you can do instead is just buy 1 or 2 chocolate bars, melt those down, and you can use a spoon or a paintbrush to just paint the inside of your molds to get a nice layer. And that's an easy way to do it if you don't want to buy a ton of chocolate. I mean, we make the chocolate here at the bakery, so we have lots of chocolate. Not a big deal for us. And then what we do is we just cool the leftover chocolate that we can use again later, or we pour it into bars. So next we're going to pop that in the fridge to cool, to set, while we work on our Kataifi. So you're going to need a blender, and we're going to add half a cup of rice flour. You want white rice flour, not brown rice flour. And then a 1/4 cup of tapioca. And then a 1/2 tablespoon of a neutral oil. We used avocado oil because that's what we have hand, but use whatever you like. Then up to 3/4 cup of water. We started with 2, which is a 1/2 cup, with the option to add up to another 1/4 cup later. So you want to start out on the lower side of things and add as you need it. You'll see when we stop it that there's still some flour in the corners, so we ended up adding 2 more tablespoons of water to this batter. So this recipe is not ours. It is courtesy of the Being Nourished blog, and we will link it below. She also has a video if you want to watch that. But she explains the consistency you want for this batter. You want it to flow off your spatula or spoon or whatever in a consistent flow. If it is too thick to flow nicely, then you need to add more liquid, more water. And if it's super runny, that it's breaking up and not in a steady stream, then you've added too much liquid and you should add a little more flour. But ours seems to be pretty perfect. Maybe a slight bit on the liquidy side, but we're going to give it a try. So they say to put it into a piping bag with a thin cake piping tip. We're just going to throw it in a Ziploc bag and snip the corner. Next, we're gonna cook the batter. This is the fun part. You're gonna wanna grab a non-stick surface, whether you want a non-stick skillet or if you have a pancake crepe maker like we do. I absolutely love this thing. And get it preheating over about medium heat. And you're going to pick up the bag containing your batter and you're gonna snip off the tiniest bit of a corner. Remember, you can always snip off more if you find it's not coming out well, but if you snip off too much, you're gonna have to switch bags and start over if you want a smaller hole. And then you're just going to squeeze bag and make a spiral pattern all over your surface. And when you've got it nicely filled, you're gonna let it cook. And you can see as it cooks, it changes in color. Because it's so thin, we don't need to flip it. You're just gonna wait till it starts to peel off the surface. And then you can grab a spatula or tongs or something just to pull it off and put it on a plate or a tray. And then you can do it again. And we're just gonna repeat this until you're finished your batter. I think I did it about 4 or 5 times and it used up the batter. In hindsight, I think I would have been more careful not to have the thick overlap parts. I ended up picking those pieces out when we go to the next step to toast it because they were more on the soft side instead of crunchy. So if I had either cut my hole smaller, squeezed less hard, or just more aware of the overlaps. And there we have it, our gluten-free Kataifi, ready to be toasted. Now in her recipe, she's using this for a different recipe, not for a Dubai chocolate bar. So she ends up popping her Kataifi into the oven to dry it out. I think this might be worth a try next time. But we were following the Dubai recipe that everyone's been doing. And so it's browned in butter in a pan. So we used some oil instead of butter to keep it vegan. And then we just broke it up into pieces into our pan and toasted it till it was brown and crispy. When it was crispy enough, we transferred it to a plate with some paper towel. And then we're going to try our alternatives and see if we can save ourselves some work. I was really hoping that rice vermicelli or quinoa puffs would work out the same or comparable at least, so that you don't have to make the Kataifi from scratch. So I just crumbled some rice vermicelli into the pan with some oil and toasted that up just the same. When it was nice and toasty, also transferred that to a paper towel lined plate to drain off the excess oil. And at the same time, I did the quinoa puffs, toasted them on our nonstick griddle and transferred them to a plate. With all our crunchy bits toasted, we're gonna prepare our filling now, and I started transferring it to bowls. I decided that our Kataifi and our rice vermicelli needed to be a little bit finer so it would mix better in our filling, so I gave that a quick rough chop. Be careful, the rice vermicelli flies everywhere when you chop it. Next up, the pistachio butter. Now, if you bought pistachio butter, totally skip this step if you're making your own. We've toasted our pistachios in the oven until fragrant, and then we're going to, you can put it in the food processor, or if you have a high-speed blender like we do, pop it in there and you can blend till smooth. And then we just added a little bit of maple syrup and a little bit of coconut oil as well, and a big pinch of salt. My blender jar was struggling that day, so I left it on the coarse side, which was nice. It was sort of more like a cookie dough when we pushed it into the molds instead of a runny pistachio butter. It actually made it quite easy to portion out into the molds because you could press it in like cookie dough. But if yours is runnier because your pistachio butter is runnier, then you're going to want to pour your filling. We just eyeballed about a 50-50 mix of our pistachio butter plus our toasted Kataifi. That's those first 2 chocolate bars. Next up, we're doing the rice vermicelli chocolate bar. And then the third one is going to be our quinoa puffs. And as you can see, I'm leaving a bit of Kataifi at the bottom of the mold there. And then when I'm finished the rice vermicelli one, I'm gonna leave it vermicelli at the bottom, because when we seal these up with chocolate, you're not gonna be able to tell which one is which unless you cut it open or bite into it. I guess you would know once you open it, but if you're giving these as gifts, you don't wanna confuse them. So leave yourself a little clue. So now that we've got them all filled, we're going to seal them up with chocolate. So you're going to pour a little bit more chocolate over top, and you're going to smooth it out with a spatula or a spoon. And then we're going to pop that in the fridge till it sets. Now, I don't know about you, but I always have trouble overfilling these molds. And so they kind of have rough edges when you pop them out of the mold. So I like to take a knife and clean up the edges. Also, a quick tip, if you have gloves kicking around, or if you want to stick your hand in, say, a Ziploc bag while you're touching the chocolate, the finished bars, it will keep fingerprints off of your bars if you're giving them as gifts. And that's it, guys. Let's have a taste test and see how these snap. I really like these molds for filled chocolate bars. It's a really good ratio of filling to chocolate. All right, so first taste test is our homemade Kataifi. It was a nice mix of crunchy yet chewy, combined with a really good pistachio flavor. We really liked that one. And then next up was the rice vermicelli, which was oh so very, very crunchy. Though I did really like the toasty flavor that came out of it. That was really nice. And then lastly was the puffed quinoa. I personally thought the quinoa puffs were not as crunchy as I would have liked. I did share samples of these chocolate bars with our friends and family and some customers that day, and everyone seemed to love the homemade Kataifi the best, so we can't save you work there. But a really close runner-up was the quinoa puffs, so if you don't want to make it from scratch, go ahead and use the quinoa puffs. These were delicious, and I definitely will be making them again. I think the only one I would not recommend doing, unless you can figure out how to make it a little less crunchy, is the rice vermicelli, because it was almost like tooth-breakingly crunchy.